Welcome to the Listen Up podcast, where we explore hearing loss, communication, connections, and health.
Hey everybody, Dr. Mark Sims here. I'm the host of the Listen Up podcast, where I feature top leaders in healthcare. This episode is brought to you by Listen Up Hearing Center. I help patients to effectively treat their hearing loss so that they can better connect with friends and family and remain socially active and remain independent. The reason I'm so passionate about hearing loss is I lost my brother Robbie twice. First to his hearing loss from his brain tumor, and then when he passed away. I only care for ears. I'm the E of ENT. I've performed over 10,000 ear surgeries in my career and taken care of many more with hearing loss. I'm the founder of Listen Up Hearing Center, and I've written a book of the same name, Listen Up, A Physician's Guide to Effectively Treating Your Hearing Loss. If you want to learn more about that, go to listenuphearing.com. That's listenuphearing.com. We have a repeat guest. She's great. Her first episode was so wonderful that we have a lot more to cover and revisit. It's Miss Cheryl Nolte. She is a hearing challenge coach, a lip reading instructor, and an advocate and consultant about hearing loss, tinnitus, and other hearing challenges, and a lip reading expert and interpreter. She established the Hearing Challenge Coach in 2019 and provides coaching and lip reading interpretation for people with hearing impairment, as well as those who work with them. She's also a lip reading instructor and coach since 2014. She's taught lip reading to hundreds of people, and she's created a curriculum. And she's also published a book, Treasure Coast Hearing Guide, and it's about help people to find the best resources and solutions to cope with their hearing loss. With the help of a strong hearing aid, she really can't hear anything, and that's why she is dependent on lip reading. Over the years, she's learned that sitting in the front row lip reading and reading body language to get the best hearing advantage. We're privileged to have her as a guest. When we talked to her last time, we talked to her about hearing apps, and today she's to educate our audience about hearing apps. Cheryl, thank you so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate it.
It's my privilege and honor to be here.
So, you sent a bunch of information on apps, and one of the things that you sent, which was great, was that there are, a bunch of categories about apps. Okay, and so can you kind of go over that? I mean, I'll read the list: hearing and noise protection apps, ear education apps, hearing test apps, specific hearing aid apps, hearing loss simulation apps, assisted listening apps. So there are a lot: tinnitus relief apps, hearing enhancement apps, and voice to text apps. So let's start, kind of tackling this in terms of that. If you could, how about you tell the story about how you kind of became an expert on apps? I suspect it's personal, but what did you do? Did you start poking around, or what did you start doing?
I have experienced hearing loss, thank you, doctor, since age 8, when I had the measles and the chickenpox. And at that point, I lost about a third of my hearing. So when I went into the 3rd grade, I wound up having to sit in the front row, which is where that comes from in my mind, in the middle of the room so that I could read the teacher's lips. And I had 7 years of lip reading training twice a week during my grade school years. And as my hearing deteriorated further with age and being exposed, I think, to noise and other things that I wasn't aware of to worry about at the time, I am almost now deaf. Okay. And so I do, even with really powerful hearing aids, at least 50% of what I get is through lip reading on average.
And so I assume at some point you got a smart device, and you started kind of like saying, what can I do with this to help me with my communication? Is that correct?
Yes. I discovered the ability to have resources like the Hearing Loss Association of America and others that are nonprofits that help people with various pieces of information and support related to hearing loss. But they're basically a secret. I had hearing loss for over 40 years before I found out about them.
Sure.
And so I got information through them. I wound up becoming president of the local chapter when we created it here. And ended up doing a lot of presentations, a lot of lip reading instruction, and coaching, actually. And so when the pandemic hit, I said, this needs to get out there. And with over-the-counter hearing aids becoming an actual availability item for people, didn't go to a professional. They needed to find out, the people that had hearing challenges needed to find out that there were so many resources out there, strategies, techniques, things to learn that would help them immensely. And most people have no idea.
Yeah. So my original contact her is she is a lip reading coach, and we'll talk about what she does in terms of all that. But right now, Cheryl, it's interesting when I look at your categories. The first one, and it's interesting. I mean, some of these categories I'm aware, but hearing noise protection apps. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of the goal of these apps and why they're important?
Yes, the hearing protection or noise detection fall under one category that I go into, and it is one of my passions, actually, to help people prevent losing more of their hearing. My motto is save tomorrow's hearing today.
Sure.
And I think that it's important for people to know that noise is the number one factor. So originally there were just a few apps out there so that you could put the app on your smartphone, and when you walk into the noisy restaurant or a venue, an exhibit hall, a meeting of a large number of people, anywhere where there might be a noise factor, you can find out if you're close to the danger limit. And a lot of people don't realize you can be exposed and not have a result from that exposure until 5 or 10 years later.
Sure.
All of a sudden you wake up one morning and you can't hear, and you don't know why. It was that concert 10 years ago.
And so do you have one on your phone that you use?
Yes, have used, since I found out about these apps, I've used the Decibel X, which is one that is simple to use. There is a free version and a professional version for if you were with OSHA or one of the manufacturers where you really need to make sure you keep an eye on your noise level. There's that as well. And there are several other really good ones. There's some that now are built into the smartphones. Apple was the first to put that on their smartphone. And so when you get a smartphone, if it's less than 3 years old, I'd say you're probably one of the major smartphones, you're probably going to find that there's an app on there, but you have to know it's there and how to use it.
And so tell me about your and so Decibel X, I assume, is an app that runs in the background. Is that right?
Yes, it's an app that you download, and when you're getting ready to go into what you think might be a noisy venue, or if all of a sudden something erupts and creates a lot of noise. It can be hand clapping.
Sure.
You could be at a play or in a movie where people are clapping at the end. It could be something as simple as a rushing of athletes running past. It could be lightning. It could be a number of things that are noisy. If you think that it's anywhere near, I tell people watch out for 80 because it doesn't take much to get to 85, the danger level. And so it measures in decibels.
My son is in an a cappella group. He sings in an a cappella group in college. And he called me his first year and said, "Dad, I have to get earplugs." And I said, "Why do you need to get earplugs?" He said, "Well, sometimes when we're performing as a group, my smartphone alarms that it's too loud. So even just people singing, believe it or not, can be too loud."
Perfect example. You can be sitting next to a tuba player. I was in the orchestra for 7 years as well. Even though I had hearing loss, I've taken shorthand and played the violin and a number of things that they can't tell you not to do, you want to do.
Sure.
And so having an app is great. It can measure the sound, but knowing how to protect with headphones that are, noise canceling, or earplugs, and there are a variety of earplugs out there. There are some specifically made for noise areas, and those are the ones that you want to use. And
Right.
interestingly, there have been people that sued fairs. I don't know if I should mention the name because you'd be surprised who was sued because it was too noisy in the concert. And
You mean a performer?
yes, yes.
Wow.
And they won. You can actually go to a concert and have it be so noisy that it can harm your hearing, and you don't want that to happen. So now they are putting disclaimers and things like that on the tickets as well. Many times you'll find a sign at the entrance if you just get there and it's open, but now they started putting it on tickets. So,
Well, there's certainly a lot of people in the rock and roll industry. If you look how they're playing up in the stage, they tend to have plexiglass boards around them, and those are sound barriers to protect them to some extent. And excuse me, most of them are wearing ear monitors and plugs. So it's very common for the industry now. But yeah, I never really thought about that, or sadly that it's coming to litigation for doing that. So go ahead.
2/3 of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame have hearing loss.
That does not surprise me.
And a big number of them also have tinnitus.
That does not surprise me either, right? And I know, unfortunately, I mean, not as a point of that being good news. It's a point of kind of matter of fact in terms of people being exposed. And so, Decibel X is one. What are some just maybe maybe one or two others that maybe people could look at just if they don't like that particular?
Right. The one that's recommended by the CDC to, if you're a car manufacturer, a manufacturing plant, or even a dealership, when you go out into where they're actually working on the vehicles and it's so noisy, recommend that you use NIOSH, NIOSH. And it is the Sound Level Act. It's actually called NIOSH Sound Level.
Because NIOSH is the noise standard, I believe, correct?
Yeah, that's a very big one. There's one called Sound Meter. Decibel X has one called Sound Meter, and Apple has one called Apple Health that includes that, among other things that have to do with health. And those are the most commonly known about and well cultivated, I want to say, apps that I'm aware of. There's a number on my pages of apps. I have a number of others listed.
No, that's great. I mean, I think that's a good starting point for people to just start and look and kind of download those apps. I think one of the things that is really amazing for people is you won't realize how loud things are until you start measuring them, and how much noise you're around until you start measuring it. I think that I suspect for you, many of the people who started using these apps and maybe had another coaching session with you came back and go, oh boy, I didn't realize how much sound there was out there. I think that's a very common experience. Have you experienced that?
Right. One of the things that dismays me is that the restaurants and the bars that have an extreme noise level can continue having such a noise level because the law shows they sell more liquor when it's noisy. And that dismays me.
Yeah, and I talked to the founder of Soundprint, if you're familiar. That's a crowdsourcing loudness in restaurant and other places. So it's a fascinating topic. Yeah, well, as I tell patients, restaurants sell food and drink, not conversation. And so there is a predisposition to making it more difficult to have conversation because the tables turn over quicker, unfortunately.
Right. Yeah. And when I do my holiday hearing strategy, which I'm getting ready to put together for a release this year again, we talk about things that you can do if you are in a noisy venue that will help. And if you're in a noisy restaurant, or if you know you're going into a restaurant, where should I sit if I have hearing difficulties, things like that. Sure. And what should I do? Those things you can do ahead of time as well.
So then the next category that you sent over was ear education and ear sharpening apps. Can you talk a little bit about kind of that class of application? So when you're talking about that category,
Yeah, there are some apps that are for adults, some for children, and some for both that have to do with sharpening your listening ability and getting you to know what matters pertaining to your hearing.
Sure.
And so it's a little bit educational, somewhat advocacy, and definitely something that helps also with keeping your brain active. So that's one way to fight dementia if you're of that age category that you worry about that.
And so we'll get into the list of the specific ones. What is the experience? In other words, when you use the app, what does the app do for you, or what do you do with the app? What, if you start one of these apps, what is the experience? In other words, what does it make you do, or what do you do with it?
What I show on my session about apps is that you need to figure out whether or not you're looking just for free apps, which makes sense, but some really good ones charge a little bit, and some only charge, for a month or a year or a forever charge. So that's good to know, and those charges sometimes keep changing. So make sure you're on an update list for whatever your app is that you're using. The thing that I like to point out is that the ability of an app to have features, like some are better for music, some do more than one thing. There's many apps that have to do with hearing loss that do more than one thing. There's some to increase your listening ability. They're basically expand your ability to listen within a certain context. And those also, some of them are also focusing on if you have tinnitus or certain other things like that. And
so what do you do with them when you're using the device or using the app? What does the app actually, so if you were to turn on the app and start doing it, what would it do with you, or what do you do with it?
With an app that is multifunctional, I will call it, you know the parameters of what the app is supposed to do. They give you choices on what you need, sometimes whether you need it more for the tinnitus or whether you need it more for listening to music or some of the other features there. So when you set up the app, you set up the controls for the app.
So these apps that are ear sharpening and education, so there are some for children and some for adults. So tell me about the one for kids. What does the app, what would be the goals, or what does the app do?
The children's app, I found more about those on a website called Healthy Hearing.
Okay.
And there are some available also through other organizations. I kind of compared 2 or 3, but that's the one that I like the compilation of the best.
Sure. And so what is the user experience? In other words, what does the app do with the child?
It helps the child learn and be able to deal with at their level the hearing loss or the hearing challenge that they have. And it helps them engage and want to keep their mind working so that they know what to focus on and not to just feel so bad because they can't hear.
Okay. And how about the adults? What do the apps, how do they work? Do they try to target certain listening situations, or how do they work?
The adults have a little more variance on what is offered. And I think that primarily the main thing that they work toward is keeping that brain active, even if you're exercising. If you're at a location or you're at home exercising, you can just use the app while you're doing that and enhance what your brain has going on. And it filters in with things that relate to advocacy and how to keep your thinking sharp, even though it might be a noisy place.
So what would be, you're an example of like one of the top apps for this for adults?
I would have to go back and do research on that, because that is something fairly new, and there are new ones that have come out. In fact, there's a new one out that has to do with being able to understand and listen to music better. And that was the one that just recently caught my eye, and I don't remember the name of that. And it reminded me that there's a new app out for Cochlear also that helps them understand music better. So there's a wide variance of those. I cover primarily the ones that have the most impact on their ability to understand the speaker's thoughts.
Okay, and so in terms of that category, ones that help people to hear speakers, et cetera, what are some of the examples of those applications?
And you probably can't hear it, but they're mowing my lawn right behind me.
That's okay. We're good. We can filter that out. But in terms of
going on, so you can't hear it, but that's all I'm hearing right now. So that's the difficulty with that. I'm trying to read your lips, but I also have captioning on my phone going on at the same time.
So what I asked was, what is an example of one of the apps that helps you hear speakers, and how does it help you? In other words, what is the activity the user does on the application?
It's almost like a psychological aspect that works on the mind, helping you focus on what you need to focus on.
But what do you do when you use
that app? But I know that they're available. And the ones that I like the best, actually.
Do you use any of them? Like, in other words, I'm trying to communicate, like, what is the experience? So if somebody turns it on, what do they do with the app?
They turn on the app and they listen. It's not the same as white noise listening. It's educational application, and also keeps your brain thinking, so that you're focusing on that, on not whatever you're trying to deal with in the way of a hearing challenge. It helps you. It gives you clues. I love the word clues. It gives you clues on how to understand the speaker better in whatever circumstance you're in as well, especially for adults. It does that. For children, it's more of a children's aspect. And I don't work with children because they get so much through the schools and their doctors. And
well, how does the application give you clues or help coach you? Does it put something on the screen as you're listening? Is it practicing exercises? What are the things that you actually do when you are using the application?
And you could be exercising. You could be...
I understand what you are doing as your activity. What I'm trying to get at, Cheryl, is when you interact with the application and it helps coach you, how does that actually happen? In other words, what does the application do? Not what the goal of it is, but what do you actually do? So I turn it on, and then what happens with the application?
You listen and let your brain be engaged to what they are saying or whatever you're listening to. Sometimes it could be music.
And how do you know, how does it coach you or give you tips? Does it put it on the screen, or is it just you get used to it because you're actually listening in a specific way?
No, it's actually it's a feeding thing that works with what you're trying to hear, let's say. And I wish I knew more about it.
Okay. And then in terms of the hearing test apps, tell me about them, and are there any that you recommend?
There was a point at which everyone that needed their hearing checked would go to the ENT or the audiologist or the hearing instrument or hearing aid specialist to get their hearing tested. And ultimately, some people just wouldn't go or couldn't go, and so they developed online hearing tests. Sure. Most of the manufacturers have very viable ones online now that you can get direct from them, but there are many separate offices, ENT offices, audiologists that have them on their website, and they pull them from there's a number of them out there right now. And
So
you can actually go to some health websites that are, let's say, not connected to selling you something, that will offer you one as well. And they have improved them. The original online hearing test got you to the point where you knew, well, I need to go see someone. Or
sure.
I don't. But there are some out there now that are much more tuned to giving you information that will let you know what type of hearing loss you have. And you can experience that. Everyone should find out. And if you go get tested, make sure you keep a copy of the test. Find out whether you have a bone conduction problem, whether you have a sensorineural loss, whether they're combined like mine are. And it's great to have. There's a number of them that you could choose from. I suggest probably either getting one from an unbiased source or from a manufacturer of the hearing aids themselves, like Oticon or Starkey. They have their own.
So it sounds like if you Google this, you would find online hearing tests. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then obviously specific hearing aid apps is another category, and that just depends on which particular brand of hearing aid you get, and they have an associated app. That's what that category is about, correct?
Yes. And so if you go to Widex, or you go to Resound, or you go to Oticon or Starkey, they have their own device, and they have their own apps that you can get to assist your hearing capacity to just hearing aids. And I shouldn't say just hearing aids.
Right.
Because hearing aids are, I think, a wonderful creation. They're like miracles in a way, but they don't solve everything.
Correct. Yeah. And so another category you talked about are hearing enhancement apps. Can you tell the audience a little bit about what those are and what you mean by that?
Those are for situations where you just can't get all of the speaker's thought, and you need a way to still understand what's being spoken, what those thoughts are. And so some of them work for within a table area, let's say, where you can have at your dinner table. It would help you. A lot of them now are on smartphones, and you just put the app on there and use that as a microphone pickup. And it feeds into your hearing aids or your cochlear device. There are some out there that you can put on your phone that have a bigger range of reach, and some that have a smaller range of reach.
Okay. No, that's an interesting category for people to look at. So it's kind of a directional microphone or an enhanced microphone that you can put using your smartphone or other devices.
There's also the capability in some cases for looping, for people with looping with those. That happens to be my favorite. So I do want to mention that. That is something that it's like you're one-on-one with whoever is actually speaking. When you're in a crowded area, that becomes a difficulty, but who you want to really understand is where you want that microphone to be, so that you can get what they are saying no matter what else is going on.
Sure, that's great. And so another category you talked about is tinnitus relief apps. Tell the audience a little bit about those applications.
Those are, I say tinnitus simply because it's easier to hear the word and read on the lips when you do it that way. And there's so many people, 15% of Americans have tinnitus, and it's not just limited to adults. But there are some that are available for specifically for what's called sound therapy. And so they call it white noise or pink noise or brown noise. The brown noise is lower decibel rating. I mean, lower frequency pretty much. I was tested actually at Sands way back in, I think it was 2010, because I had severe tinnitus, for comparing to see if I already wore hearing aids, and that didn't take care of it, if white noise would help. And my tinnitus was so loud, it was much louder than any white noise. Even if they turned it up, they said, no, this is not it. There's one called sound therapy, There's Nature Space, which is the one where you hear among the favorites that I would listen to would be waterfalls or fountains. Some people like the jungle sounds. You hear frogs or things like that. And then there's another one called My Noise, and the M in My Noise is not capitalized, but that's really a favorite one because you get to select which one you want as your host, but then you can change it around whatever you want. And I will mention that actually the American Tinnitus Association has a whole list of them that you can choose from and download their app for.
Great.
Some of them are combined with music and some are not. It's really interesting. They have a whole, I think, 2 pages of them.
Wow, that's great. And then, so one of the other categories you talked about was a hearing loss simulation app.
Right. That, I think of that when I think of the 10-minute test app that we would give, where your counterpart, the person that you want to put in your shoes, so to speak, is wearing earplugs. And you're trying to communicate. So the hearing simulation is how does this work if I have this limitation or that limitation, and all of a sudden you're in the shoes of whoever that pertains to.
So what are some of the names of the apps to try for that?
Oh goodness. I know that they have that on some of the manufacturer sites, so I would go there. I believe Whitex is the one that I remember the most on that.
Okay.
And that was pretty easy to use.
Okay. And how about...
That's the one that comes to mind.
How about voice to text apps?
Oh, man. There's some of those that are really good, and some of the ones that do captioning have voice to text in them as well. And I think that if you go to the sites for Captionate and CapTel, have those, I believe. And trying to look at my list here because some of the smartphones have that built into them as well now.
Well, yeah, because you can dictate it. Certainly you can dictate a text at this point.
Yeah, and actually that is a great thing to have when you're going into a doctor's office or to a hospital or anywhere where you, for instance, like if you lose your voice easy or you don't have a voice, you're not going to use it. But if you want to get something in there because you are losing your voice, get them to understand right away, and then they can bring out the quartet board, or you can read lips or whatever the technique is that you want to use instead. It can be kind of, I call it a switcheroo.
And then the last category you talked about are assisted listening apps. So what is that category about?
There's actually 2 parts of that. There are the part that is also both on my phone. One is for captioning when you're one-on-one or you're in a group and you want to know what's being said, and it plays off whatever the speaker has and is using. Sometimes it can pick up microphones if you're close enough. And it will caption what is being said. And some of them are just what the other person is saying, and some of them is both what you're saying and what they're saying. And some of them offer the ability to save and go back and review the app. Some of them do not. So you want to look for that. Live Transcribe, which is now Google owned, is the first one that I was aware of, and it's still very popular today, and it's built in on some devices that you get automatically, although you might not see it called that there.
Sure.
And I like the fact that Live Transcribe also worked with Gallaudet to develop their app. Gallaudet University.
So needless
Voice is a good one. Both of those are in 80 languages.
Wow.
Which I think is amazing. And there's one called Dragon Anywhere that is a favorite with, I want to say, the engineer and professional strategy and logistics kind of work. They like Dragon Anywhere. Ava is free and is one that offers pretty much all kinds of speech to text, captioning, and has a free starter plan and then charges, but they're very, very highly rated. It's AVA. And new ones are Olilo, which is expanding. When I first talked to Olilo, they hadn't even set up with the FCC yet, but they are now. And one called Articulate, which is new. And that one, you can pick your color of your font as it's running down the screen, and your size and everything before you even get your first readout.
So there's certainly a bunch of them for people can try to figure out which one works best for them and which interface they like the most, correct?
Right. Those are the one-on-one or the one in group and not the telephone ones. There's another batch that are for receiving and for when you are calling out with phone calls. And some of those both do both things, both in person and phone calls, but some do not. And again, some of those are built right into your phone. The one that has the most background that I'm aware of that I've used for years is InnoCaption. And they actually now have where you can text them when you're not getting it correctly and find out what the issue is, and they will work with you until it's solved. It's not where you have to get on the phone with them and you can't understand the phone anyway. Kind of ironic, back when they first set up, that was the way it worked for them. But I like the ability to be able to just get them on a text message and say, I'm having difficulty, this is what's going on, and they text you back really quickly. That's one example. Olilo also does that. Hamilton Captel has gotten into that, but you have to have their particular account, not just an app that you call, but you set up an actual account with them, and it's for Apple products only. And Caption Call is the other one that they provide the home phone as well as the phone call app for your smartphone. And they both work, both Android and on your Apple product. And
so all of these applications are part of what you teach people to help communicate more effectively with their hearing loss in your coaching and lip reading class. Is that correct, Cheryl?
Yes, there's 250 apps just for hearing challenges alone, another 250 created for tinnitus, and there's just hundreds of apps, and it's kind of overwhelming if you're not knowing anything about what's going to work for me. So as a coach, I try and show them their best options, and they can pick and choose what really matters most to them, and try it out. And then there's always I always like to give 3 options for things, so they can try the first one they choose and then go on and try another. I'm not a coach that sells more than expertise.
Right. In other words, you say, here's a list of 3, check them out. Different ones work differently or better for different people, so you should check them all out which one you like. That's because people really have to figure out which one works for them, not which one works for you.
Correctly. That's right. I always suggest that they look for, and there's 52 million people with these hearing challenges now, that have like a little checklist when you're looking for an app. You want to find out how easy it is to use. Some of them are easier than others. You want to find out, will it work on your type of smartphone? And some of the apps actually work on a laptop or tablet as well. And then there's special features. You want to know about the clarity issue, which is so important for me. And many people prefer that as part of the schematics. What they're looking for has to have high clarity.
Sure.
And you get to your sound selection. What can I do with this app? Can I make it louder? Can I make it less loud within the app itself? Can I change the font? Just things like that. And then ratings, and they can find out the ratings themselves. That's part of the research that I do to try and list on my 15 pages of apps that I go through So
For the listener, Cheryl has a comprehensive, she's gone through, done all the work for you. And so, Cheryl, this is part of your lip reading coaching and class. Is that correct?
yes,
Tell us about that. I know you have an upcoming class in a month or so. So what does that entail? In other words, you do, how long is the program, and what do you do during
the lip reading classes? My lip reading for beginners is 12 hours, and I try to teach it in a simpler fashion than many others may,
Sure.
because the first thing you hear when you hear lip reading is, oh, that's so hard to learn.
Right.
And so I try to simplify that for them. I went to what I call the Sherlock method, and part of that is looking for the clues that will help you and the things that you don't need to worry about. And it's so freeing for people. And 98% of my students learn more than they thought. I have 3 different segments of classes. There's the once a week, twice a week, or marathon type classes. And I have had requests for some people for 1 hour classes as opposed to my usual 90 minutes for the weekly or bi-weekly.
So that's great. So if people want to learn more about your lip reading classes and stuff, Cheryl, where would they go? What would be the website to find that?
Their website is www.hearingchallengecoach.com.
Okay. So that's hearingchallengecoach.com, correct?
Yeah.
And if people want to find you otherwise, what would they do? How would they find you?
They would email me at speechreader2, and the 2 is a number 2, at gmail.com.
Okay. So this is Cheryl Nolte. She's the lip reading coach, and the hearing challenge coach is what she goes. And so, if you want to reach out and learn more about her great classes, obviously there's a ton of resources and places that Cheryl can point you to learn more about the apps. I mean, we tried to do a brief overview of everything. There's a lot of ways to help you, and she can help you find the ones that would do you. And I encourage all people with hearing impairment or who have other people around them who are challenged to look at these apps to enhance their ability to communicate with people. Does that sound like a fair way to go at it, Cheryl?
Yes.
Well, Cheryl, again, thank you so much for bringing these apps. And again, what's your website? So if people want to find you.
It's www.hearingchallengecoach.com.
Okay, hearingchallengecoach.com. Thanks, Cheryl. This has been a great episode, and there's an overwhelming number of apps, and I appreciate you kind of narrowing it down and looking at the different categories. Thanks again.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in to the Listen Up podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get updates on future episodes.